r/AskReddit. Divorce men of Reddit. What moment with your former wife made me think yup, I'm asking this girl to divorce me. We met and spent the first 7 years of our married life on the west coast, then moved east. 5 years later, I took a job back on the west coast, but it was the middle of the school year, so I went out ahead and lived on my own until everyone could join me. Things hadn't been very good between us for a while, but I hadn't articulated it to her or even myself beyond vague feelings of dissatisfaction. One weekend, out there on my own, I decided to take a day and drive to one of my favorite towns, a town in which I had lived long before I knew her, a town we had visited often while married. It was late afternoon, was about to head back to my hotel, when I realized that I could visit a particular beach that had special meaning to me from my earlier life there. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a growlsh like I used to drink on that beach, and drove out there. Hiked out to a specific spot I remembered, sat down, popped the beer, and looked out over the ocean. And it hit me that I hadn't done that in over 20 years. Whenever we'd visit the area, I'd suggest stopping at the beach, but she wasn't interested and would always veto the idea. I'm sure reading this, it seems like the tiniest thing, but it was the catalyst for me realizing just how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I think from the time I sat down, I knew it was over within maybe 10 minutes. Just sitting there, sipping my beer, looking at the ocean. Edit, RIP Embarks, and my first gold. Thanks, Redditors. I seriously thought this would be one of those I'm late to the thread so no one will read it posts. Thank you for all the incredibly kind words. Growlsh is indeed a Dutch beer. It can be had in distinctive green bottles with hinged, resealable ceramic caps. I chose it because when I had lived in that place before and had headed out to that specific beach with friends, I'd always bring growlsh. 15 years in, and I find texts on her phone. Completely blindsided. No clue she had it in her to cheat. Told me it was just texting. Begged for forgiveness. I caved. A month later, checked the phone bill to find that it never stopped. Confronted her again. Cue more begging and more denial on my part that she would let the life we had built go down in flames. This went on for a few months. So many promises. One night, I caught her on the phone when she thought I had left. Suddenly it's not just texts. Sometimes it was phone calls too. Just a friend she could talk to that she'll let things go too far with. Promised to break all contact. Swore it was never physical. Then I found emails. She detailed things that made me sick to read, but also included descriptions of his house. She broke finally, but swore it was all just in the line of duty. That's how she met, you see. Visiting nurse service, and this guy was a client. Promised she was done. Loved me, you see. No chance she was going to let 15 years go like that. I wasn't buying it anymore though. She announced she was going out one night with a work friend. Promised they were only going to the bar, then she'd be home. Maybe late, but not too late. She had taken over her own phone account by then, but wasn't bright enough to understand that Google Latitude was still showing me where she was, and I wasn't about to show my hand. She kissed me goodbye and beelined right for his house, and was there until the wee hours of the morning. Once I knew where she had headed, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything dumb. I will love them both forever for keeping me calm while my world went fucking insane all around me. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home. Around 3 AM, while couch surfing my buddy's place, she sent me a nasty text asking where the fuck I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her little GPS dot at her boyfriend's and let her know I'd be sending her some paperwork soon. I'd found evidence of potential cheating. Despite this, I still was willing to work on things. I confronted her about her feelings towards me, not the cheating. When I point blank asked her if she was interested in counseling or trying to work things out, she said no. That was the first time. It would have been better to have stuck with it. There was a tumultuous time after that where we flip-flopped and were trying to work things out. Sorta. She complicated things. I had broached the cheating with her and we made rules during our maintenance period. One of which was that she was no longer to have contact with her friend she was cheating with. I ended up finding out that she was still Facebook friends with him. When I calmly explained why this would hurt me, she turned it around that I was a bad guy. I started living with a friend at this point. During my drunken half-sobbing tirade where I explained everything to him, I finally realized that I don't want to be with this woman anymore. She doesn't love, respect, or care for me at all, and I deserve those things. Moved out, moved on, and have since found a wonderful woman that I will marry in April, even though I figured I would never get married again. Edit. I got hurt. It sucked. It sucked really bad. I never expected to get a divorce. I took some time to work on myself and address the mistakes that I made in my marriage and past relationships. I ended up finding a person who 100% is in sync with me and communicates like a mature adult. She is super smart and helps me through my emotions as I help her through hers. I did a complete 180 on marriage. It wasn't a struggle. It feels right. I thought long and hard after I had decided to get married. I wanted to make sure I was not making the same mistakes again. I believe I've found my true partner and each day gives me more reasons to believe that to be true. Wasn't married but about 1 month away from marrying. We worked together at the same job for about a year, but she was first shift and I was second. We both had weekends off so we could and did things on the weekend. We had got everything paid for and were set. One weekend, actually on my birthday, I went to get a haircut before we went out for the night. I weirdly noticed this one car in the parking lot of our apartments. Didn't think too much as there was a shit ton of cars that would come and go. She had gone up to a casino with her mom the previous night and stayed overnight. That wasn't uncommon as they were both huge gamblers. I got back and did some cleaning and she walked in. She looked at me and threw her ring on the table and said, "We need to talk. I think I like Joe more now and decided I want to be with him. I don't need the ring and you can cancel the wedding." It all clicked. That car I seen was Joe's. She didn't go up to the casino with her mom, but with Joe instead. Even more fucked up is I called her mom to see how close they were to home and she covered for her daughter. I then come to find out her friend Joe was her ex-lover who also broke up her last engagement. He was always trying to befriend me too and act like we were best friends. I have never felt less of a man, more ashamed and hurt than when this happened. I sacrificed a lot for her. I was there doing anything and everything for her and her family when her dad very slowly passed away. And she ends up treating me like a pet she could get rid of when she got bored. I still can't remember a few months of time after that happened. I was in a bad place. Edit. I just realized I never finished this up. It took a while to get my head straight. My best friend of over 20 years, to me a brother in family, helped me out so much. He made sure I was going to be okay and took me out to blow off steam. We took an awesome trip to some fun ass spots with a few other people. I owe him so much for the help. My family really helped too. I ended up meeting my fiance now about 6 months after I had that shit happen. We have been together for over 5 years and we will be celebrating our first daughter's birthday on June 29th. Amazing what has happened since then. My one advice is, don't ever give up or think you are worthless. You are worth everything to somebody out there no matter what. I can say I'm almost embarrassed by how I reacted back then. Lol. Edit again. I never expected this to get this much attention. Thank you everybody for the kind words. And yes, my ex and I were together for about 4 years. I will say, after I met my new fiance now, about a month into dating I got a new job and got to say good riddance to the last of my ex. One of the greatest things ever. The oddest thing too was my best friend who stuck with me actually had his dad pass away my last week at work. My last day, I had told them I needed to leave at 3 PM to go help my best and his family with last minute wake and funeral stuff. They told I can't leave and they won't let me. After how my ex got everybody there to somehow feel really bad for her about leaving me, and I got left with people telling me how they feel bad for her, I just dropped my shit on the ground and left. I remember the supervisor saying you are going to get into lots of trouble, and I looked at her dead in the eyes and go, what? Am I going to get fired? And just started laughing on my way out. My wife at the time told me that she had called a local radio station which often discusses hardships that military families go through and sometimes gives away $1,000 to a family in need of help. She said that she informed the radio station of my deployment and how I didn't come back the same, and she told them about our daughter, 2 months premature and only 8 months old at the time, who had numerous health problems. My wife explained to me that the radio station hadn't given away the $1,000 in quite a few weeks, so they were going to give us $10,000 for her telling such a heartfelt story. She called me while I was at work to tell me what had happened, and I was really excited. Asked my SNCOIC to help me draw up a savings plan and figure out which debts should be paid off first, etc. Things were looking up. I get home that night and, rather than being greeting with an enthusiastic hug, she points to the loft and mouths not now, I'm on the phone. So I go upstairs and wait for her to finish. While I was waiting I could hear her saying things like, yeah, I can get those papers to you and no problem. I can have that ready by tomorrow. HMM. Maybe they need identification and proof of my deployment or something. Whatever. Fast forward to later that night, and like usual I'm having trouble sleeping. I decide to get on the computer and listen to the podcast from the radio show. After a few searches I find it and start listening to it. This is where my blood starts to boil. She told the DJs that she was a single lady living on her own and that her sister married a Marine and they had a child named Mary, our daughter's middle name. She goes on to say that Mary is now in her custody after the Marine husband, me, sort of, was killed in Afghanistan, and the mother, her IRL single sister with no kids, Jackie, was killed in a car wreck, and Mary was now my wife's responsibility. Hundreds of people called in and offered to help, many of which owned business and wanted to offer things like baby supplies or completely furnishing a nursery for her. Literally thousands of people had heard this bullshit fabricated story, including some of my coworkers. It was the radio station she was on the phone with, and they were asking her to provide death certificates and a birth certificate for Mary, which is why I was hood away. I worked, she played. She woke me up in the middle of the night to grab the extra blanket off the bed. I expected to find her disgruntled on the couch alone the next morning. I found her in the guest bed with another woman, both naked. No forewarnings or clue-ins. Just despondent betrayal. I woke her for answers and got a whole lot of mumbles. Decided to split for space. That weekend we both ended up at the same bar on the same dance floor. I thought she'd followed me there to make amends. She'd brought the same girl and completely ignored me when I called out to her. When I walked up to her she pretended I was a stranger. I told her I'm not going to play any games and didn't know what was going on. She said she didn't want to be married. I gave her the ring back and went to tell my friends goodbye that night. I didn't want to tell them why. I felt so embarrassed. She saw me talking to my friends and decided to make out in front of us with her new woman directly on the dance floor 8 feet away from where I stood while everyone stared. Looking back now I realize she probably was scared to come out. I can give her credit for that. But she was an awful person for the way she did it and for never having the courage to say to my face whatever she was feeling. I thought we were best friends. I thought we were going to be together forever. She asked me to marry her. Now I'm just grateful for not being with a liar and a coward. I've made a fresh start. Sold everything. Traded my entire wardrobe and style to feel like I'm in a new life. Sure, I've lost more money than I ever thought imaginable. And the dog. I just keep optimistic that I'll find someone who deserves my time. I don't focus on the past, and I have faith in God in the future. Whoever I marry next will be grateful for a man like me and loyal. But until then I'm gonna enjoy the single life again and just play. I'd been married for 14 years. We split up the day before our anniversary. I was fucking tired. When I had something happen to me, it wasn't a problem. When something happened to her, it was the worst. One example is a year-long cardiac issue on my end. Arrhythmia, stress tests, Holter monitors, specialist appointments, that sort of thing. On her end, one time she forgot to eat lunch and choked on some too hot food and hit her head when she passed out. Those were, in her mind, equivalent. There are other examples. When I lost my job and told her I was having trouble mentally, she told me, quote, "Just try harder," and that was the sum total of emotional support I got in 14 years of marriage. By surprise one day, I found out I was seriously sensitive to a medication. I passed out for a couple of days, did a lot of vomiting. My body kept throwing firmware errors when I tried to wake up. Not a username joke, it's the best way to describe it. And I was more than a little disappointed when I didn't wake up in the hospital. I lost 8 pounds in a couple of days and 5 of those pounds never really found their way back on. She was mad that I'd lost weight. She went on vacations every year with her teams and clubs. She thought of my work trips as equivalent to vacation, so I never got any time off. We only had short kid trips to the next city, and before that was our honeymoon. Conversations were a nightmare. If I phrased anything imperfectly, she'd hold it against me for years. I told her that sex was a way to feel an emotional bond or something like that, and she kept bringing it up that that's how you feel love. So it was nearly impossible to say anything important about anything at all. I couldn't relax at home. I couldn't feel like I couldn't say things or do things without it being recorded mentally and thrown back at me. It was like being on camera all the time, and it felt like she was just trying to trap me with any given conversation. She still does this, trying to get me to agree to oddly specific phrases or bringing up old issues over email after they've been resolved, like the time I caught her stealing money from the children. In the last year, she just kept asking me, weekly, daily, if I was cheating. She'd been refusing any kind of sex, told me to stop asking, and when she initiated anything I'd have to guess exactly what she wanted, no questioning from me, and any mistake ended up with her crying. It was dreadful. So, I kicked my own ass to get into better shape. I went from pear to V and lost a bunch of weight and put on a bunch of muscle. I hired a trainer from the gym, and she had a party and I wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. Who is Susan? Accusing me of flirting with the clerks in stores when I was there with my ex. I still remember her saying, in bed, that I'd gained a lot of muscle, and I was sad that she'd noticed, because she really shouldn't have taken so long. That she should have noticed. In counseling, she'd said that she never asked me to do any of the fitness stuff, and my inside voice was screaming, yes, you did. Every time you said I wasn't sexy enough. I ended up losing a total of 90 pounds from the time we met to the time we split. So yes, I looked at porn. She was fine with it at the start, then somewhere along the line she conflated porn and cheating, and eventually even masturbation and cheating. The damnable thing about this is that, if anyone knew much about me, you'd know how much I dislike germs, so no, I wouldn't put my lips or junk on a stranger's face and or tackle a box. I tried to explain that, look, if I won't eat leftover desserts from the kids' plates, what makes you think I'd be comfortable with cheating? I discovered later that there was a very high likelihood that she had cheated on me, and more than once. I suppose in retrospect the conversation that started with how chlamydia can stay in the body for a long time should have been more of a red flag. We were each other's firsts, and at some point I developed HPV, but who knows where that came from? I suspect some of her major health issues stemmed from complications from an abortion after I'd been sterilized. In all honesty, whatever, I don't care about her anymore other than I hope she's healthy, because we share custody of our kids and I don't want to go to her funeral until the kids are a lot older. She looks like hell though, easily up more than 300 pounds. I hope she gets better. So what was the final straw? When I realized that she wanted all the time in the world to fix any problem she was facing, and that I had to face all of mine alone and fix them overnight or sooner if possible. In the morning after the last counseling session, she asked me if I thought it was okay to lie to people that you're in a relationship with. And of course, yes, there are lies that are acceptable. I went to the anniversary dinner alone. The waitress calmed my meal. Sometime after the split, I was talking to someone online about his ex. He was beaten up on the regular with her flailing her forearms at him, making her physical abuse look like defensive wounds, and like he'd grabbed her hard. He was only able to escape once cheap cameras were available and easily hidden. When he heard my story, he said, "Amen, brother," and it wasn't until then that I realized that my ex was an abusive cheater that kept gaslighting me. On the upside, when the divorce was finalized, the papers were ready a day early, so I went and got them and posed with the process server for a Facebook photo. It was a regular Thursday, but my American friends wondered in amazement how I got served on a holiday. We celebrate our national holiday a few days earlier up here, so I was given my divorce papers on Independence Day. So, before I write this, I would just like to say I'm a 27-year-old female, and I'm telling the story of my father, and when he knew it was time to divorce my biological mamaka, the uterus as I commonly refer to her. My father passed when I was 17, so this is his posthumous tale. My biological mother was extremely abusive both physically and mentally, hell spiritually even. She cheated on my father shamelessly. As a child I remember her throwing things at his head and leaving for days and coming back home when my father had his paycheck. I remember watching my father cry in the kitchen sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. He tried to stay in the marriage for the sake of me not being part of a broken family. He tried his best to make my childhood as normal as he could. I also had a half sister whom shared the same mom but different dad. My mother was so tasteless, and she would often take my sister with her and have sex right in front of her. Needless to say, my half sister grew up with the preconceived notion that sex equals love. She was pregnant at 15 and married at 17. Anyway, not to digress, the breaking point for my dad was when my mom dropped me off one night at 1 AM on a school night and went back out to a family party. My father was getting me ready for bed and I asked him why. Did mommy have her tongue in someone's mouth? Threshold had been reached. What I distinctly remember was how my dad handled such abuse with such dignity. I woke up to his things gone and my mother back home cursing and threatening to make his life hell and waging war on him. She told me I'd never see him again. I went into hysterics. My father came back and bought me a present and apologized and tried to explain to me he'd see me on weekends. I wasn't having it. I would cry non-stop. My mother couldn't take it and told my father to pick me up. She remarried a few months later and tried to go for full custody, but my father fought tooth and nail. He won after having a psychologist deem her mentally unstable and unsafe. I guess the only reason I wanted to write this was I'm reading these stories and I see my childhood, and as an adult I have an intense sense of gratitude for my father. For going through what he did and raising me the way he did with what he had. I sincerely also wanted to say thanks to the men who have children, or who do not have, going through such torment and malice the way you guys have. You never know who else is impacted, and I can say in the truest sense my dad is a hero for going through what he did and also showing me what unconditional love is, and I wake up every day appreciative for it. I also thank the uterus too, for showing me the woman I do not want to ever be, and sex does not equal love. She passed away a year ago, died alone on her deathbed. Obligatory, not my former wife, but with my fiance. The moment we went to the bank. We'd been together over 4 years, engaged for 1.5. If circumstances had gone our way a little more than they had, we would have been married. I know it. She really was my soulmate. We connected from the moment we met each other, and through thick and thin, the ups and the downs, we were always there for each other, understood each other. We'd been saving to buy a house together. That was the plan. Buy the house, get married, settle down and have kids. She had a debt issue. I knew that when we first started dating, but she'd been working to pay it off, and she had, and here we were, ready to buy a house. This was our year. We went to a couple of open houses for fun, to see what we could afford in our price range, to imagine ourselves living there together, snuggled up watching TV, or laying in bed with a book, or breakfast in bed together, or whatever. It didn't matter. Just her and myself in our own home together. We went to the bank together, mostly for my own financial purposes, but when my advisor asked if we wanted to get a mortgage pre-approval just to see what the bank said we could do, why not? We weren't going to rush into anything right away. I said yes. She clutched my leg and said no. We left. Nerves, she said. It's a big step in our lives together. I knew that. The thought of going to those open houses terrified me. Before we did it, we were crossing that boundary between just talking about it and it's real. I'll let it be for a while. Not a big deal. But something didn't sit right. After dinner I sat her down, asked her. Nerves, she reaffirmed. I still didn't buy it. I pushed her to tell me. I knew something was up. She started to cry. If I tell you, you'll leave me. I told her I wouldn't. I couldn't. There was no money. The substantial amount of money she assured me she was saving up didn't exist. She had nothing. And not just nothing, but the money she claimed she had she was actually in debt to the bank for. The amount she told me she was in debt for when we first started dating, that was a significantly reduced amount. I was in shock. I went into the shower and cried like a baby. Our plans, they never really existed. My fiance, she consistently lied to me for over 4 years. I couldn't believe it. She threw away so much money to keep the lie going. She needed a new car. I told her she could afford a new one, so she went and bought a brand new one. She spent a ridiculous amount of money on me and my family for Christmas gifts, pretty much gifts for any holiday she went big for. We even had an evening out celebration of her paying off her debt. Finally, it was supposed to mark a new beginning of our lives moving forward. It wasn't real. She even picked on my own family members who were irresponsible with their finances, with us never realizing that she was potentially even worse off. I didn't sleep on it. The next morning I helped her pack her things and she left. I cried again. But 2 days later I asked if she wanted to meet to work things out. She agreed. I thought I could look past it. We tried for a few more weeks, but I couldn't. I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't trust the words that came out of her mouth. I left for a second time. A month later, after lots of introspection and reflection, I saw her side of it. The embarrassment of revealing the debt in its true form in the first place. Then the realization that the hole was dug too deep and there's no way out. I sent her an email asking if she wanted to talk, not to commit to anything, but to see if we could slowly rebuild what we had together. I still loved her with my whole heart and I wanted to make this us work. She agreed and we started talking. Then the second moment came. In the few short weeks we'd been apart, she joined Tinder, which wasn't a bad thing in and of itself. But then I found out she'd been on 4 separate dates, or so she says. 3 with one guy. She hated it, she claimed. She said she compared them to me, but they weren't the same. She did it to try to ease the pain, she said. It didn't make sense to me. Couldn't she have figured that out from a single date? How did she make it to 4 before this realization kicked in? I dreamt at night of her, dressed up as beautiful as she always was, but with someone who wasn't me. At a fancy restaurant, the kiss afterwards, the ride home together. I couldn't do it. She swore she never had sex with anyone, but she also swore up and down that she never had anything to hide to begin with. I couldn't do it. I couldn't trust that she was telling me the truth. And I thought I knew when she was lying, but she did such a good job pulling the wool over my eyes that I had no idea what to look for, what the signs would be. I told her I couldn't do it, and I stopped talking to her. That was a week ago. I miss her terribly, I really do. I still love her, no less than a week ago, or a month ago, or a year ago. I wanted us to work out so badly, but that once a combo of the lying, then jumping straight to dating other men so quickly. She never even reached out, never said hi, never asked how I was doing. She isn't the same woman to me who I thought she was, and that's what's tearing me apart inside. Because in my heart I still have my baby girl from 2 months ago when things were perfect and I was blissfully ignorant, and that's what I want so badly. But I know it shouldn't, can't be. The woman in my heart is gone, and I don't think she ever really existed in the first place. I don't know what hurts more, the fact that she lied, or the fact that she maybe didn't love me as much as she said she did, not enough to deter her from seeing other men. Oh, I have a good one for this. Throw away since things are crazy. She's mentally unstable and regularly tries to find anything she can to ruin mine and my son's life. Details will be slightly adjusted for privacy reasons. Well, it took a lot since she did so much to fuck with my head, and it's sad to say, it worked really well. Over the 7 years of our marriage she had at least 4 affairs that are confirmed, and multiple more nights out that went to nowhere. This is not to even mention the 3 other people she slept with while we were dating. I know, well then, why the fuck did you marry her? She cheated on me and left for my cousin just after my son turned 2. Day of his birthday party actually. Rode there with me, rode him with my cousin, and was sleeping with him before that day even. She moved in with him and took our son with her. That relationship lasted about 6 months officially, and we got back together to try again. I know, stupid. She kept texting. Sexting is more appropriate of a description. For the next several months. Well, it's likely it never stopped actually. She had sex with the guy she'd cheated on me with while we were dating, and then happily came home and gave me a kiss like nothing had happened. I found the receipts for their hotel they got together is how I even found out. Then she had a relationship with guy while his wife was getting cancer treatments. She moved in with him. His wife was hospital bound and his 8-year-old son with severe autism. He divorced his wife while she was getting treatments and ended up with custody by default since she was too sick to take care of him. I continued to financially support her and our son since she'd never had a job in her life, and her boyfriend got fired for misconduct shortly after she moved in. They lost his house, his car, and ended up having to relocate to the boyfriend's uncle's house who lived several hours away. I helped her fund this move and still tried my best to work with her and trying to see my son. I worked nights and had no family or support system where we lived after she moved out, and we had a lease, so I didn't have the financials to just move when she up and left with a free place offered to her again. Once the lease was up, I moved as close as my job would allow to make visitation easier. This was still pretty far away sadly. I continued to try and ask for more time with my son, since I hated seeing him only 1 day a week, and even changed my work schedule to try and facilitate this. Then she dropped the line of "I just don't think more time would be healthy for him," meaning our son. I contacted an attorney that day. My son came to spend my father's birthday with us, and she called saying she was taking him back with her before lunch and there was nothing I could do to stop her. I refused. She called the police. Police told her that since I'm the father they couldn't force me to give him up. I filed for divorce and custody the next day. The court battle just ended today actually, after 3 years in the courtroom and multiple counts of contempt against her, tons of evidence of her committing perjury on the stand, and a currently insane legal debt that I will be paying on for probably the rest of my life. I have sole custody of my son. It was long fought, cost me multiple friends, over $30,000, $16K of which I still owe in attorney's fees, which is going to be insane to figure out how to pay on its own. I have my son in my custody. He's sleeping here in my arms now, and I'm so glad that I'm able to keep him safe from her antics that were self-destructive, dangerous, and neglectful of not just me or herself, but of our son. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.